When we were in love, I described Timothy as a warm swamp. He's the kind of person who doesn't have much going on but seems carefree. Because, as he says, there's no hope in this world anyway. He has a kind of pessimistic optimism. Being already pessimistic and not optimistic about many things, he lives day by day, so he appears optimistic. Whenever I complained to him, he would just say, "It's okay." He has this confidence because his family has provided him with a way out. But don't think he's from a wealthy family. At most, it's a well-off family. He's the only son, and his parents are both working, supporting him with some surplus. His spending, compared to mine, is considered generous, but it's far from extravagant, and his family can afford it. We moved in together shortly after being together, splitting the rent half and half. Some friends asked, "What's the point of having a boyfriend like him? He lives with a girl and still makes the girl pay. Doesn't he feel embarrassed? What's the use of having Timothy?" Well, not much in practical terms. No upgrading to a better house or a new car. It's just happiness because I genuinely like him. In today's trendy language, he provides me with emotional value. As for the embarrassment issue, Timothy doesn't carry any burden. What's wrong with living together and splitting expenses equally? He's quite open about it. His personal salary can cover rent and meals, but not much else. However, this doesn't stop him from buying things. His hobbies revolve around electronic products, and he spends quite a bit on them. I was puzzled. How can he afford a higher level of consumption with a lower salary than mine? I asked him where the money comes from. He said, "Credit cards." "Then why do you still use credit cards?" He lowered his voice and said, "My mom." That was the first time I knew that despite being an adult for so long, he was still asking his family for money. How can you do that? He felt a bit ashamed about this aspect of being an adult male and only said, "They owe me." As for how they owe him, I slowly pieced together the rough outline of the story after being with him for a long time. Timothy has a terrible father. In his occasional descriptions, I can roughly outline an image of a father who is stubborn, conservative, loves to deny everything, and controls his son like a pet. Timothy's grades plummeted in high school, and he eventually attended a vocational school. The fact that he didn't go to college has been repeatedly brought up by his father every year for the past 6 or 7 years until the time I was in a relationship with him. Once, while he was on the phone in his room, I heard a loud voice coming from his mobile phone, "You can't even get into college, and you still think you're capable." Timothy had no expression and didn't argue, he just said, After hanging up, I asked him, "Why don't you argue and tell him that you're not that bad?" Timothy said, "It's useless, he'll say the same next time. Besides," he self-mockingly smiled, "I'm really not that successful." I wanted to say something more, but he didn't want to hear it. Perhaps because he never received any affirmation from an early age, he had long lost faith in his own abilities. He only demands a very small part from this world, with no ambition or grand aspirations. Another time, when he went back to his hometown to celebrate his grandfather's birthday, his mother didn't take him to a hotel for a feast after picking him up at the airport. Instead, she drove him straight home to deal with a meal there. He didn't understand. He came back specifically for this. Why not let him wish his grandfather well? His mother pointed to his hair, said nothing, and left. During that period, Timothy had grown a slightly longer hair and tied a small braid on the top. This is completely normal in our usual working life in S City, but in that small county town, in front of relatives, he would be pointed at, saying he doesn't look like a boy, and at his age, he should look more decent. He was puzzled. He came back on purpose. Why not let him join the celebration? His mother observed his father's constant denial and suppression over the years. She maintained neutrality, not hurting her husband's dignity but also not defending her son. Privately, she advised reconciliation on both sides. Timothy always knew that his mother wasn't entirely on his side. In this small place, she cared immensely about so-called face. He knew that not going to a prestigious university and working in a job with a modest salary had never brought her any pride. Now, even his hairstyle is disappointing. He deserves to be given up on. Hungry, Timothy took the high-speed train back to S City from his hometown. Timothy is very different from me, and he's also very different from the ideal type I initially expected. I wanted to be with someone impressive, not necessarily perfect in every aspect, but better than me in certain ways. For example, better at making money, better at learning, or better at handling relationships. But Timothy exudes an air of non-impressiveness, as if nothing about him is particularly outstanding. It seems quite unbelievable that we would be together. I met Timothy through a social app. The app has gained a bit of a notorious reputation, with people assuming that those who use it are playboys or only looking for physical encounters. No one considers them decent individuals. However, a few years ago, the app's reputation wasn't as bad. I had used it to go on dates with several men. We would meet up for meals, chat, take walks, watch movies, nothing more and nothing less. There were no heartbreaks. At that time, I had been single for a long time and eagerly hoped to find someone to date. Due to the limited options for potential partners in real life, I started using some online social apps. The app had a lot of users, and there were plenty of matches, but only a fraction of those matches actually led to face-to-face meetings. Among those, none resulted in a mutual agreement to continue the relationship. Until I met Timothy. Our first meeting happened in a very random way. It was a Friday, and I was on the subway heading home after work when my stomach started hurting. Coincidentally, I received a message from him on the app. "What are you doing?" I honestly replied, "Having stomach pain." He immediately said, "Where are you? I'll come to see you." I promptly refused. Who meets a stranger like this for the first time? Whenever I met others, I would make sure to dress up nicely. Unlike now, after a day of work with no makeup, greasy bangs, and aching waist. My appearance was terrible. Besides, I was not feeling well, and him coming wouldn't magically cure me. I couldn't even accompany him for a meal or a bubble tea, making it seem like he came all this way for nothing. It was simply unnecessary. But he insisted, saying it twice, "I just want to see you." Perhaps illness makes people vulnerable, making them unable to resist the desire for a bit of warmth. In the end, I couldn't refuse, and he waited for me at the subway exit. It was raining that day, and it was November, so it was cold. The wind on my face was chilly, and he stood in the rain wearing all black, holding a huge black umbrella, almost blending into the night. "You're almost invisible in all that black," I greeted him. "I recognized you at a glance," he said with a faint smile, handing me a drink. "Have something warm." I took it, and when I looked down, I noticed his pants were soaked. He must have waited for quite a while. "Why didn't you go into the station to wait for me?" "Oh." He seemed to realize, I forgot I could go into the station. After saying that, we shared a smile, and the awkwardness and unease typical of strangers meeting disappeared. I no longer worried about my terrible appearance. I relaxed. That day he only escorted me from the subway exit to my doorstep before leaving. Before parting ways, I felt a bit embarrassed. He came on such a rainy day to bring me a warm drink, and we only spent about 10 minutes together. He seemed to sense it, and before leaving, he said, "We have a long way to go." It was as if he meant that there was no need to rush into anything at this moment. That night before going to bed, we exchanged WeChat IDs and stopped using the previous app for chatting. The first thing he said to me on WeChat was, "You look even better than in your photos." I wouldn't believe it if someone else said that. But at that moment, I believed him. Just like when he said he came to see me, and he really did just see me. I felt he wasn't a smooth talker. The second meeting also happened at that subway exit. It was a Wednesday, and I worked overtime until around 9 p.m. I sent him a message, "So tired." He replied, "Then I'll come and see you." This time he didn't directly take me home. Near my place, there was a creative park transformed from an abandoned slaughterhouse, a popular spot for taking photos. He suggested going there. We walked side by side, and as we walked, I suddenly felt like I couldn't hear any other sounds, no traffic noise, no chatter from pedestrians, no rustling of leaves in the wind. All the usual sounds belonging to this city vanished. Beside me, there was only Timothy, who became the embodiment of this city. Just as I found it wonderfully strange, I suddenly heard the only sound, coming from Timothy, "Can I hold your hand?" Even though I'm not shy, I couldn't find words to respond. It was as if at this moment, only Timothy's voice could exist. He read the yes from my expression, took a step closer, and held my hand. He held my hand with all fingers intertwined. Despite that, I felt like my hand was entirely enveloped by his, and I became smaller. At 10 o'clock at night, there were no other visitors in the park. He held my hand and led me up the winding stairs. The dim lights and the echoing sound of our footsteps in the spacious environment brought back the chilling atmosphere of the old slaughterhouse. I shivered, and Timothy tightened his grip on my hand. "Don't go up anymore." I stopped, leaning against the wall of the stairs. "Are you scared?" Timothy looked a bit teasing. I didn't say anything, so he put away his playful expression and became serious. "I'm here, everything will be fine. Maybe you are the dangerous one," I joked. I was actually just kidding, but he seemed to take it seriously. With a more earnest tone, he said, "No, I will never hurt you." It was only our second meeting, and he used the word forever. For a moment, I felt a bit moved. "Can I kiss you?" I asked him. He had a big reaction, seemed a bit stunned, and after a while, he lowered his head slightly. "Why are you stealing my lines?" I burst into laughter, and just as I opened my mouth to speak, Timothy's lips covered mine. The taste of that kiss was incredible, like the first green bean popsicle of summer. In early winter, I experienced the taste of summer. This was what love felt like. After that, we continued to have many more dates. He never formally confessed, but it seemed like he assumed we were already a couple. One day, I told him, "Let's uninstall the app." Without looking up, he replied, "I uninstalled it a long time ago." That day was December 13th, and in my heart, I considered it the day we officially started dating. If I were to analyze rationally, I couldn't pinpoint exactly why I liked Timothy. Maybe I just felt he was sincere. When he complimented me, said he wanted to protect me, I naturally believed him. If someone else said the same to me shortly after meeting, I would have been skeptical. He seemed to naturally inspire trust in me. Actually, that wasn't a reason at all. In the end, I liked him based on some kind of unreasonable feeling. After all, love often revolves around these sudden heart-pounding moments, right? During the passionate phase, we decided to move in together. Looking back, it was probably because S-City was too vast, and without each other's tight embrace, it felt challenging to resist. Before, I rented a 3-bedroom apartment, and I hardly spoke a few words to my 2 roommates under the same roof for a whole year. After work, everyone tacitly stayed in their small rooms, not disturbing each other. I didn't know if they were used to this independence, but I felt lonely and confined. Living together with Timothy, due to budget constraints, we could only find a large single room with no living room, but it was enough. Coming home after work, there was someone to greet me, saying, "You're back." In that moment, it seemed like I suddenly understood why so many people yearned for marriage. Because someone was always waiting for me to come home, and there was always a light on for me. Both Timothy and I weren't good at cooking, but the taste of self-made food, with the investment of time and effort, was different. Especially when eating something made by the other person, the flavor was enhanced. We sat at a small table with small stools, watching variety shows while eating. It was simple and plain, filled with laughter, and the ambitions or worries temporarily disappeared. We just wanted the happiness in front of us to last forever. However, after the passionate phase, we began to argue frequently. In the beginning, our arguments revolved around trivial matters of daily life. I disliked some of Timothy's personal habits. For instance, he would leave his dirty socks hanging on the shoe rack without washing them immediately, and he refused to stuff them into the shoes. "Why hang them on the shoe rack? It looks so ugly. Why are you staring at my stinky socks?" Another example was our decision to use an old bed sheet as a sofa cover to save money, resulting in frequent wrinkles. Every time I got up, I would casually tidy it up, but he never did. No matter how twisted the sofa cover became, it didn't bother him when he sat down directly. "Can't you tidy it up a bit? Is it that difficult? This thing is not important. Isn't it better to spend time on more important matters?" There were numerous instances like these, and while breaking up over such matters seemed trivial, constant arguments did affect our relationship. I always felt, "Why can't you do something for me when they are just small things?" At the same time, he felt, "Why can't you just let me off for these small things?" At that time, we were both determined to change each other. It took me a long time to realize that for a lasting relationship, it's not about changing the other person, it's about fully accepting them. Back then, lacking experience, we stumbled through, resulting in many frustrations. However, overall, these things had nothing to do with our breakup. The reason we eventually parted ways was because of the profound despondency within him. Of course, he knew that playing games, watching anime, and browsing Taobao weren't the important things in life. But by not doing these things, he would have to confront the genuinely important aspects of life, such as his relationship with his parents, reconciling with his family of origin, constructing his inner world, and finding meaning in life. These aspects were like mountains. He lowered his head before the towering mountains, resisting the climb. If he were to completely accept staying at the foot of the mountain, it might have been okay, a form of self-consistency. Yet, there would still be moments when he would have the urge to move upward. I once read a viewpoint in a book that referred to this upward urge as ethical aspirations. It's challenging for people to completely detach themselves from ethics. Timothy found it difficult to fully accept a lifetime of mediocrity. Occasionally, he would struggle, set some goals, but usually wouldn't take practical actions to achieve them. Even if he did, it would be sporadic. Afterward, he would return to playing games, watching anime, and browsing Taobao. The main theme of his life was escapism. I vividly remember the first time I felt the endless despondency emanating from him. We had been together for about 8 or 9 months. It was a sunny Saturday, and we decided to go out for a photo shoot. I had finished my makeup, changed my clothes, and he suddenly said he didn't want to go. I asked him why. He said coldly, "Just don't feel like it." He sat on the bed, motionless, staring at his phone with no expression on his face. I was angry but tried to suppress my fury while communicating with him. "What's happening? Can we solve it together? There must be a reason for suddenly not wanting to go, right?" He shook his head, remaining silent. The room was filled with the harsh sound of short videos playing on his phone as he mindlessly scrolled through TikTok. The various noisy pop songs inundated the room, assaulting my eardrums and frantically stimulating my nerves. I was on the edge of exploding. "Do you have tendencies of depression?" He still didn't speak, casually swiping through his TikTok. "Timothy, answer me." He acted as if he couldn't hear me. I lunged forward, snatching his phone away. He quickly grabbed it back and left the room, closing the door, leaving me alone. One afternoon with no messages, by 11 p.m., I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer and sent him a message, asking where he was and when he would be coming home. He replied with a photo of the sea, followed by a 50-second audio clip filled with the sound of waves. A profound sense of loneliness seeped out of my phone. "Where is this?" I inquired. He remained silent but sent a location, a coastal city near S City, about an hour away by high-speed train. "Are you really suffering from depression?" I asked him. His response was, "I won't be coming back tonight. See you tomorrow." After that, he didn't reply. When I saw him the next day, he had reverted to his carefree, smiling self. I said, "Why not see a psychologist?" "No need," he chuckled. But from his face, I couldn't see genuine joy. Instead, I saw endless despondency. It was as if he were sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean, surrounded by darkness, accepting all the darkness without any struggle. He was a part of the despondency, merged with it. I felt that the despondency simultaneously gave him the strength to live. If those layers of despondency were stripped away, he would live an extremely difficult life. In a way, he needed the despondency, he chose it. Faced with his situation, I often experienced conflicting emotions. On one hand, I wanted to embrace him in the deep sea, alleviating his loneliness. On the other hand, I would occasionally blame him for not being ambitious or trying to swim to the surface. Many people with difficult family backgrounds have managed to break free from their past. When Timothy occasionally displayed signs of despondency, I expressed this viewpoint to him, hoping he would become more proactive. He only responded with, "It's easy to talk when you're standing," and I remained silent. At the same time, it seemed that his despondency gave rise to tremendous tolerance. During moments when my emotions were crumbling, he supported me. I lived much more tensely than Timothy. With an average family condition, close to poverty, my parents couldn't provide me with a safety net, and I had to become my own fallback. Hence, I lived under tremendous pressure, constantly biting the bullet. Living in the glamorous S City, gazing at countless skyscrapers that would never belong to me, I often felt disheartened and pushed myself through it. Not confident in my ability to earn money, I relentlessly saved, accumulating a bit of security. On the second year of being together with Timothy on Double 11, Singles Day, a shopping festival, I broke down in tears because I missed a discount due to time constraints. I thought Timothy would find me exaggerated. It was just a matter of a dozen yuan. Was it necessary to cry so sadly? But he didn't. Timothy handed me tissues to wipe away my tears, hugged me, and then took my phone to check if there was still a chance to grab the discount. He didn't mock me, he just said, it's okay, and let me help you check." That night before bed, I asked him, "Don't you think I'm unreasonable? Don't you think it's unnecessary for me to cry like that?" "I just feel you're working too hard," he said. Tears rolled down my cheeks in the darkness. "Come here for a hug," he continued. I moved closer, pressing my face against his chest, listening to a heartbeat similar to mine, feeling a wave of tranquility. At that moment, I thought, maybe I could spend my whole life with him in the deep sea. He was the person in this world who understood me. He knew that my tears were not just about a dozen yuan discount, he knew about all my hardships. He wasn't the kind of person who could make me less stressed, but he was the person who hugged me when I was struggling. Because of his tenderness, I could catch my breath in many moments. However, in many other moments, I still felt conflicted because he also brought significant negative influences into my life. Moving upward is challenging, while moving downward is almost effortless. In front of me, he displayed an image of living happily without making an effort. He encouraged the lazy part of my heart. My self-imposed weekend study and improvement plans often ended because of the temptation of his entertainment. He watched anime, and I would binge-watch dramas. The room was filled with the sounds of decadence, making it incredibly easy for a person to move downward. By Sunday night, I started to regret, and my heart was filled with guilt. I had talked to him before, suggesting that we make efforts to learn something together. However, he responded, "There is no hope in this world." I wanted to argue with him, but before I could speak, he continued, "You can think there's hope, you can make efforts, but I can't do it." His attitude was clear, and further discussion seemed futile. I tried to make efforts on my own, but I often found myself influenced by him. I increasingly felt that he was like a warm swamp, and the more I indulged in his tenderness, the more I would fall with him. The regret and anxiety after wasting time often tormented me, causing sleepless nights. On our second anniversary, I broached the topic of our future with him. I asked, "Have you ever thought about marrying me?" Timothy replied, "Would you want to marry me?" I was momentarily speechless. "I know you don't want to, it's okay. I don't want marriage either. What should we do then? Isn't maintaining the current situation fine?" The current situation? How could there be such a thing? I would only continue to fall into darkness with him, and I would increasingly feel that our future together was bleak. "No, it's not good. Let's break up." Timothy didn't seem surprised, as if he had expected this day to come. He hugged me and wished me a future with a sad tone. With a few months left until the lease expired, we agreed to move out and part ways when the lease ended. After that, my emotions fluctuated, sometimes feeling that breaking up was the right decision, that I should free myself from this swamp. Other times, I hesitated because deep down, I genuinely liked him. In this state of indecision, one day I suddenly felt that we couldn't just part ways like this, at least, we needed to do something more. I shared this sentiment with him, and he responded, "How about we go on a trip? Is a trip really that special?" "We've traveled before," I replied, dissatisfied. "Well, what if this time the trip is longer? We can go to many places. But we don't have the time." "Quit your job." Insane. Were we going to throw away everything, even our livelihood, after ending our relationship? In the end, we did go crazy, both of us quit our jobs and embarked on a breakup journey. It was unbelievable. After more than 2 years of a relationship that couldn't lead to marriage, we decided to leave our jobs and go on an adventure. We canceled the lease, packed 3 suitcases, and set off. The first stop was Xi'an from S-City, where we saw the terracotta warriors and ate many Reggiamo. 5 days later, we landed in Lhasa, under the vast blue sky, experiencing altitude sickness. We visited the Potala Palace with oxygen tanks in hand and marveled at the stunning Yamdrok Lake. 10 days later, we flew to Shangri-La, held hands on the Meili Snow Mountain, and gained 4 pounds from eating yak hot pot every day. A week later, we arrived in Lijiang, where we idled in the ancient city, basking in the sun, and listened to folk music in small pubs. 8 days later, we reached Dali, staying in a cozy inn that resembled a library. We rode electric bikes around Arai Lake, feeling the golden age of our lives in the October breeze. After half a month, we went to Chengdu, got ear piercings in Quanzhai Alley, and ate hot pot until our bottoms ached. 9 days later, we took a high-speed train to Chongqing, loudly proclaiming, "Le Wudu." Chongqing is foggy, climbing mountains every day, often getting lost, taking many photos in the dazzling lights of Hongyudong, and making wishes on the cable car, crossing the Yangtze River. A month later, we flew to Wuhan, ate cheap and delicious hot dry noodles in a sweet food museum, watched the nation's top students play basketball at Wuhan University, and felt the cold wind by East Lake. Lastly, we went to Changsha, drank at least 2 cups of tea each day, climbed the unimpressive Yuelu Mountain, and welcomed the new year at Orange Isle, witnessing the most beautiful fireworks of our lives. 3 months, 9 cities, we traveled, paused, and casually controlled our time, gaining much irreplaceable joy. Leaving S-City, I finally felt a sense of inner peace. I was no longer afraid of being left behind by peers or scared that everyone was doing better than me. On January 3, 2020, we parted ways at Changsha Huanghua Airport, returning to our respective hometowns. With tearful eyes, I said something foolish, "Can't we not break up? We are really happy." He hugged me, comforting me as he had countless times before, gently stroking my hair. "You deserve a better life. Go on, I will always support you." Later, the unexpected pandemic hit, and I was grateful that we, like prophets, had seen so many beautiful landscapes before it arrived. We thoroughly enjoyed freedom and romance. After the new year, despite the severe pandemic, I needed to return to work. This time, I didn't go back to S City, I went to Y City, a less bustling and less easily confusing place. I started commuting alone and rented a place on my own. Timothy stayed in his hometown, still arguing with his family, but fortunately, he didn't continue to evade. That entire year, we both felt lonely but encouraged each other from two distant cities. We transformed from lovers into good friends. In 2021, our communication gradually decreased. My career was flourishing, and I made good friends in the city. Timothy, facing the high risk of the pandemic, persisted in opening a fried chicken shop, something he had mentioned wanting to do in S City. Finally, he did it, and the world didn't seem so bad to him anymore. We both lived well, just no longer in love with each other. In one's lifetime, there seems to be a person destined not to be there forever but only for a while. Yet, this one can be remembered for a lifetime. I will never forget the feeling of being embraced by his chest, like a warm swamp. He once carved out a small but entirely mine place in S City with his own arms. In the youngest days, we often lacked money, but we had each other's love, making our youth worthwhile. Thank you, Timothy. Thank you for the warm swamp.